September 6th DRB meeting to order. First item's agenda changes. I know none.
I don't have any for you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We'll review the minutes of August 16th.
Look good to me.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah,
Proposed to accept as written.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next is Town of Hinesburg, old police station.
Okay, so I'm your staff person and I'm also the applicant.
Okay.
So pretend I'm the applicant and treat me as such. Be nice.
We'll try.
So you're familiar with the town's project with the old police station. Energy Futures Group was interested in purchasing the old building, which was great. They're a local business. And so the town set about in subdividing the property to create a lot around the old police station. You gave final approval to that subdivision in April, I believe it was, of this year. And it turns out that having two entities working together, sometimes you miss things. And so what we missed was that EFG is going to use the same, going to preserve the bulk of the building, but they are going to resheath it. So they're going to take the siding off, put insulation on, put new siding on, and in the process, the building's going to grow just because of that by 6 inches or so. And we had set up the boundary lines of the lot exactly at the setback requirements. Oops. So when EFG talked to the zoning administrator in advance of getting the zoning permit, just to make sure everything was going to be okay, Mitch said, wait a minute, this isn't going to meet the setback on the north side.
So there's
of
not
the
like a
lot.
plus or minus a foot on a survey?
Not enough. No, that was an oops. We probably should have done that. So in any case, fairly basic revision that's needed. We've provided you with a revised draft survey that pushes that northern lot line for lot 2, 2 feet to the north, and that should give it plenty of room and a little extra on top of that. So the subdivision revision request is to move that boundary line. The other part of the request is a recognition that the existing building, frontage of the building that faces Route 116, is not compliant with the 10-foot setback from the edge of the right-of-way of 116. It never has been. It isn't right now. And again, the EFG is intending to resheathe the building, so the front of the building is going to, move by several inches towards Route 116. They're going to retain the porch and steps that come off the front of the front door. And in the original subdivision decision, there was some lack of clarity, I'll say, about where the Route 116 right-of-way was. And we've clarified that now, and so we understand that we need a waiver on the front yard setback, just to recognize the existing condition that we have today and the slight adjustment for the resheathing of the building that will happen. So that's a long-winded way of saying there are 2 revisions proposed for the subdivision. One is to move the northern boundary line of Lot 2 a couple feet to the north, and the other is to grant, because this was a PUD, grant another waiver to the ones that you already did grant for the front yard setback to bring it down to be quite small. I think the front of the porch is literally a foot off of the Route 116 right-of-way.
And that's existing condition, pre-existing.
Existing, except it's going to get a little worse because the building is being
Right.
resheathed. So, 6 inches
Right. Yeah.
worse.
Yeah, it seems minor to me. It's already been surveyed?
Yes, we had the surveyor prepare this revised one that was in your packet. And we also had the surveyor clarify the Route 116 right-of-way. Because actually VTrans gave EFG some not so good information about the location of the right-of-way as they understood it. There's many, many divisions of VTrans, so it depends who you talk to, I guess. Anyways, the surveyor was clear about where it was, so
Okay.
that's all been reflected on the new survey.
So if the porch and steps are remaining, and they were before, So technically, it's not any further.
No, it's just that,
Right.
because the building will get a little
Right.
6 inches wider for the sheathing, everything will move towards 116, those 6 inches or so,
Right.
just like they will on around the rest of the building. And it just presents an issue on the north side and then the Route 116 side for waiver.
Any other board members have any questions?
No.
Sorry. I'll open it up to the public. Anybody here for,
I am.
just state your name, please.
Richard Fazy.
Okay.
One of the owners of Energy Futures Group.
Okay.
So we're working with the town. I don't have anything to add. I think Alex laid it out concisely, and it was. I think we share the responsibility of not being aware that adding insulation around the exterior of the building would push us into the within the 10-foot setback. I believe there's a 1-inch leeway, but is what Mitch said. But we'll be adding 4 inches of insulation plus sheathing and siding, so
Okay.
thus the 6 inches.
All right. Thank you. Greg, do you have anything?
Insulation usually goes on the inside. This time it's going on the outside.
Both.
That's my contribution. Thank you, Ken.
So Energy Futures Group, Richard, is here for a related application for a sign.
Yes.
But for the purposes of this, these are really two separate hearings or reviews. So I drafted approval language for you to consider for each of them separately. One for this application by the town and one for EFG.
Okay.
I would move to approve the revision as written.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next is the freestanding sign.
Right, Richard can speak to that and I'll just put it up on screen.
So we have applied for a sign. We've worked with Alex in terms of trying to understand the regulations and comply within those. And so we are applying for a freestanding sign. Let's see, I get the terminology right. Freestanding sign of approximately 10.6 square feet, which is within the 16-foot limit. Our plans for the building, as you may recall, we will be having housing our office in the addition, which is shown on the top of this, but basically the west side, and we'll be renting the existing police station after retrofit to 1 to 3 businesses potentially. Downstairs space we hope to rent for retail space, and then there are 2 offices upstairs that would either be 1 or 2 businesses there. So it could be a total of up to 4 businesses, ours and 3 others, or it could be less. We want the ability to be able to list on the sign the number of businesses that are there, but we working within the freestanding sign regulations, as long as we're within the 16 feet, it appears that we have that flexibility. There's a initial sign design there too. The lighting was a question as well. We would any lighting that we would install there would be a gooseneck type lighting with LED lights that would be controlled and shut off when the building's unoccupied.
Okay.
And if you didn't notice from that last screen, this is where the sign is proposed.
Thank you.
Is that,
So
is that
the-
where the existing or previous police station sign was, or did we have one?
There's one hanging, I believe
think
it's
we-
on the building.
I think we had one that was attached to the building that was hanging.
Okay.
I don't think we had a freestanding
Didn't have a
one.
freestanding sign, okay.
So it would be setback from the sidewalk to avoid plowing mishaps, and within the boundary that was defined previously from the setback from the state right of way. So it'll be within the property, but setback.
Okay.
I have no questions or comments.
Any other board
Me
members?
either.
I'll open it up to the public again. Ready?
Where do we get the 3 feet from? Is that what the recommendation is from the town?
Yep.
It is, okay.
Yeah, it's not in the regs.
Okay, that's what I
But when
wondered.
Richard talked about it, I was like, we don't want to hit your sign when we're plowing, and you want to leave some room for snow, and
Right.
you
Yeah.
agreed.
Okay, just checking. I didn't remember
The,
that.
wasn't-
the
it wasn't in
others
the
are in
regs,
fact in the regs. You have to be 10 feet from the property line on the side, and you got to be 15 feet from the traveled portion of 116. So it meets what's in the regs. The 3 feet is just hopefully common sense.
There's a draft decision that I've read. I had no quibbles with it. Move to approve the draft.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, up next, Iroquois Snow Beavers, conditional use review. Looks like you want to put a new bridge in.
Yeah,
So, would you mind just coming up so the
sure.
viewing audience can hear you? Just state your name, please.
Yeah, I'm Eric Gangstrom. I'm president of the Iroquois Snow Beavers Snowmobile Club.
Okay.
To clarify, we're a volunteer club within the organization of VASP, which is the statewide Vermont Association of Snow Travelers.
Okay.
We operate around 25 miles of trail between Hinesburg and Huntington. We're a primary connector between Charlotte, Williston, and Duxbury, Facein, so it's a very important corridor of snowmobile trail that connects Chittenden County with Addison and also Washington County. So we're looking to replace a decrepit bridge over Patrick Brook on Lyman's property on Creekside.
Mm-hmm.
That bridge is currently fallen over, is currently in the stream after this past spring flooding event. So we're looking to preserve the trail by resurrecting a new bridge which happens to be in the floodplain of both Patrick Brook and Plat. We actually have 2 bridge crossings over the Patrick Brook. This one in particular is the bridge that services the east to west corridor. We also have one that goes north-south, but this is the one circled in yellow there that Alex is circling is the bridge currently in question. We're trying to change the culture in how we operate. Typically in the past, we would just get landowner permission and just go in and throw poles and decking across the bridge, but being mindful of the sensitive environmental impacts of this particular location, being in a very active flooding area, we found it to be prudent to go through the necessary actions and make sure we go through the appropriate planning avenues. So not only are we not impacting those potential people around that bridge location, but also being mindful that probably planned bridge is infrastructure that is longer lasting, and it's will be built for longevity. So currently the plan is to increase the length of the bridge an extra 2 feet on either side, and the point of this is that would be able to increase the abutment elevation an extra 2 feet to allow for flood water to pass more freely underneath the bridge. This avoids any natural stream alterations, so that building on the actual stream banks rather than excavating out the stream channel will actually avoid stream alteration permitting. Will fall within the less than 2 cubic foot earth and removal and excavation for the state statute. The girders will be constructed of high-tension poles, which are flood-resilient materials. Decking and railing will all be made of wood. Usually we prefer either pressure-treated or hemlock. In this case, will be pressure-treated 2x material. Since this bridge will be elevated an extra 2 feet, we'll need some ramping to get up and down the bridge. So the plan is to create some wooden, what do we call it, wood railings on either side and use earth fill for the ramps, seeded with winter rye, mulched heavily to prevent erosion. I contacted Malone and McBroom, who had done the previous hydraulic study for the creekside. They had done pretty extensive modeling for the area. Contacted Brian Coate, who said he'd be willing to rerun the analysis, the no-rise analysis, to ensure that any construction within this floodplain would not result in a rise of water elevation and modeled flood years. I forget, what do we have, 10-year, 50-year, 100-year, and 500-year flood intervals. From that study, it was determined that there would be no increase in flood depths up or downstream of the crossing, and that raising the bridge will actually reduce constriction from what is presently there, causing 30% reduction in flood velocities with less erosion potential due to that. It'll be fitted with a tethering system. So the plan would be to create some cement pylons with hooks and cabling to ensure that in the rare event that it would potentially cause the bridge to shift or move, that it would be tethered to the earth so that it's not carried downstream and impact any future development in the area. So it is a popular recreation spot. It's enjoyed more than just snowmobiles. We've catered to recreationists of all seasons in the summer and in the winter. I touched on it being a vital corridor for amenities and businesses. It's especially from the west. It's our one of the only ways that we can get to fuel and the local businesses coming from the west.
The only question I had, and my guess is most board members have, is what kind of fill material they're going to use to really stabilize those and
Well,
so we don't have issues.
for the ramps, it was suggested that we would just use regular topsoil and seed with the grass to establish the large tall grasses that are there now. The thought behind that is there really hasn't been any erosion in that upper portion of the stream bank. The only place where it's bare is in the actual channel. So establishing as early as possible a grassy, natural vegetated ramp would likely be our least costly and two most effective given the costs. We could build decking ramps to enter and exit the bridge. We have done that in the past, and not apply any fill. But that's not always the most effective way for us to enter and exit the bridge. It would be easier if we were able to allow the fill and allow the grasses to grow. Brian Coate of Malone and McBroom had suggested some alternatives. There was he had mentioned there is a armoring material that we can purchase that would, if we follow the manufacturing specs, allows up to a 10 foot per second, has a 10 foot per second erosion mitigation factor, I guess is what they call it. However, given the max flood velocities of the area being upwards of 6 to 7 feet, it would likely be overkill for the particular application.
So is the only fill we're talking about, Alex, these ramps?
That's it, yep. The idea is that
So
the
it's
bridge
not
will
going-
actually be above the stream now by 2 feet, so there needs to be fill or something to get the bridge up higher, and then because it's up higher, some kind of ramp to get up to the bridge from existing grade. And I think Eric and I talked, we think it's about 10 cubic yards
About 10 cubic
of fill.
yards of fill, given
So-
that the ramps are supposedly, well, the bridge is going to be elevated 2 feet by 14 feet wide, out approximately 10 to 14 feet we had estimated. So given those dimensions, we estimated about 10 cubic feet of fill. In our grant application, we estimated it would be about a dump truck load, which is typically between 10 and 14 cubic yards of material.
Wouldn't rock be more stable and not any more expensive?
He had mentioned that we could use rock. I'm open to any suggestions. I
Well, I kind of trust your engineer.
Yeah. So I mean that he had said that he said based on what we're seeing in the modeling estimates, he said I would suggest that vegetation on the ramps would be adequate.
This isn't a real high velocity area once it floods, because once it floods, it's gone out over a huge area, right?
And the highest velocities would be the flooding from the La Plat. He had said since the orientation of the bridge being parallel with the La Plat, the velocities would actually be going along the parallel orientation of the bridge. So orientation in that area would actually help mitigate some of the erosion factor as well.
So, let me understand, the bridge is 14 feet long in span, is that
No, the
correct?
span is around 30 feet. It's
30
about
feet.
14 feet wide. The
Okay.
ramps would have to be 14 foot wide for
Okay.
the entrance and exit of the.
So, like, are there 2 points of support on either end of the bridge?
Yeah.
And there's a truss that basically runs the 32 feet?
Yeah, the girders that we'll have will be the high tension poles, and we use 50-foot
Yeah.
long tension poles, and we cut them to length, and those are the spans for the
Okay.
bridge, and then the decking gets set on top of that.
Yeah.
So the girders would then be attached to the abutments, which would be 2 feet off of the
And are they
surface
made
of the
out of
area.
concrete,
No, they would be wooden.
wooden,
Yeah.
and just into the ground?
Yep.
And so then, if you build an earthen ramp, is there some kind of retaining condition against those 2 columns that then support the earth? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean we have in the plans we have the timbers, like we have 6x6 timbers that we use
Mhm.
as spanning out as the ramps, and then the earth was filled in between the timbers.
Okay.
So the timbers themselves also act as retention for
Mhm.
the soil that are used for the ramps up to the bridge.
Okay. So when you say 2 feet, it's being elevated in 2 feet. Does that mean that the top surface of the bridge is roughly 2 feet above, say, for example, when you're approaching,
Yes.
the ramp is basically dealing with that 2 feet change in elevation? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
As opposed to being set in the channel,
Yeah.
where no ramps would then be needed, but then we're dealing with possible stream alteration issues. It would be set inside the channel, which is not,
Mhm.
very well received in
Yeah.
flood-prone areas.
Okay.
What's the condition of the other bridge?
It needs to be removed. It's currently in the channel.
No, I think Greg means the northerly bridge,
Oh,
the one that you're not replacing.
Yeah.
The one that services towards the Jiffy
You
Mart?
said
Yeah.
there are 2 in the floodplain.
Yeah, that one's fine. We had made some adjustments to that one in the previous year, and that one survived fine. Not to say, any future event might change that, but.
So with
as of
these
now-
winters we've had, are you having more flooding in summer or winter?
It's a good question. The bridge was actually in the channel last year. But since we didn't have any snow, we didn't address it. So I mean, there was no real need to address it. And the time between the spring and now has been the planning of the new bridge. So usually we deal with more of the flooding in the spring and the snow melt.
So just to be on the record, there's, in the draft approval, there's a bold underlined section that says approximately X cubic yards would be used for fill. We've clarified that, it's about 10. And there's a big note saying waiting on state level review, because anytime there's development in the flood hazard area, we have to provide the application to the state. We got that today. So Rebecca Pfeiffer responded and basically said, it looks good. She didn't identify any compliance issues with our regs, and I didn't either, so that's why there's a draft approval in front of you.
So that's finding 10 that doesn't really need to be there, right?
Finding 10, correct. We would probably revise, yes, we would want to revise that to say that she provided the feedback today and that identified no issues. So really the only issue I brought up was the one Greg raised, which is this whole thing about adding fill in September. How fast can you get stuff to grow on it so that if we get a flood event in November, it doesn't just wash, what's holding the bridge up away, or holding the ramp up, what have you. But
Okay.
it sounds like Brian at Milo McBroom thinks there's enough time and right kind of vegetation, just plant it and mulch it and
Yeah,
it'll be
he
all
said,
right.
he said the only addendum to what he might propose would be to make sure that it's mulched extra heavily to prevent, in case there is a mild flooding event, that the mulch would hold the sediment in place.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the route that you guys are most comfortable with and the board feels is adequate. I wonder if there's a way to use the, it's sort of a grid of fabric for steeper slopes when you're trying to seed stuff on steeper slopes. I wonder if using that and, tacking it in might be even that much better. Just holding it through this initial growing period with mulch on top of that. I'm just thinking about, boy, if we get a doozy of a storm and we have a real flood event in November, I'd hate to see all your hard work get washed into the stream.
Right.
Plus, the stream wouldn't like it so much.
Practical question. My guess is Dave Lyman is just allowing you to use his land. I don't know, maybe he has some kind of lease, I don't know.
We have a year-to-year agreement.
What if there develop issues with respect to this bridge or other bridges? Who is the town to deal with in terms of enforcement issues?
For
Well,
removing the bridge?
I mean, if there's an issue that developed with respect to this replaced bridge, about it gets damaged or gets swept away, replacement issues, fixing issues, how is that dealt with?
Mr. Lyman has signed a vast bridge agreement form, which basically gives us the rights to the bridge, and that in any case that the bridge needs to be removed, torn down, etc., that our club is responsible for ensuring that it's removed and replaced in a husbandly fashion.
So in theory, if we were to take action against the landowner, he would turn to you for corrective action?
Correct.
And do you have the resources to deal with that if it becomes necessary?
Yes.
Board members have any other questions?
I'll just make a point of interest. It is my father. I mean, I don't see any issue here. Can I vote? I'm in favor of it. I just want to make sure there's full disclosure.
Yeah, when it comes to conflicts, it's really at the board member's discretion, so disclosure is good. And then if you feel like you're not compromised,
I don't
not
feel I
having
am.
any direct financial interest, then if
Well,
everybody else
I think a
agrees.
regulation has some specific talk about direct familial connection.
Yeah, maybe it makes sense to just call that up. We don't look at our rules of procedure all that often, but I got them here somewhere. Given that the landowner is not benefiting from it, it's hard for me to see how his son would also be benefiting from it. Let's see here. DRB meetings, rules of procedure. Well, we haven't looked at this since, or haven't changed it since 2012. All right, let me find the right section.
And who's the applicant in this?
So this is an application by the landowner. We have to have landowners sign off on any application, and Iroquois Snow Beavers. So they are co-applicants. But as Eric mentioned, it's pretty clear that the one responsible is in fact the Snow Beavers.
I like that name.
It's hard to say with a straight face.
Okay, all right.
I'm imagining beaver tails being distributed. you
We
know.
deal with a lot of beavers, yeah. In fact, they may not actually be helping us in this case, because I think there's a beaver dam a little upstream in the Little Plat that might be lowering the actual water level in this particular site.
So all you gotta do is arrange some snow this year, I think. That would be- see if we
So
work on
this
that.
is the section in question, and it says each board member shall decide whether he has a conflict, he or she has a conflict of interest. However, if the board were to vote and a majority finds that there is a conflict, then that member should be barred. And then, as Greg mentioned, it says board members shall not personally or through any member of the household.
I think
Just
C may be the more pertinent.
Oh, sorry, I was reading A. Yeah, I think that's just procedural.
Mhm.
What you do when you recuse yourself.
Yeah, I think it's up to the board member.
I'll recuse myself just so there is no conflict.
Okay, well, that makes it easy. Don, can you just note that for the minutes, that John's gonna recuse himself, just to make sure there's no impression of any conflict? Even if there isn't any to begin with?
Board members have any other questions?
I don't.
I'll open it up to the public. Just please state your name. If you have anything you would like to add.
You want me up there, or can I speak from here?
You can speak from there.
Kyle Bostwick, I'm representing as an adjoining landowner, and I just was here. I wasn't aware of what kind of support or non-support was going to be here, so I thought I would show up. We've lived in our present location of 339 Farm Mall for 10 years, and have been certainly been neighbors of this bridge and the trail that runs south, and have nothing but positive things to say about this group. I've worked with this group just both in a volunteer effort and also just to see what they've done, and so I'm just here merely as a voice of support, as an adjoining landowner.
And Kyle, you live right there,
I live
right?
right there, yes. I in fact.
You are the nearest
I
landowner
am
to
the
this
nearest landowner to
this
that
project.
bridge, yes, absolutely. So, we actually have, I believe we have an agreement that is multi-year. Provided it stays in its present condition, I'm excited about that. It's a great benefit to the area. I have young children who, again, have grown over the last 10 years, and they've loved seeing it. It's just a great addition. It's a very, very positive interaction with what we've got going on, especially if we can add the town recreation trails to coincide with this vast trail. I think that the inclusion of this bridge is necessary to keep that part of the trail open. So, again, without going on, I'm in support.
All right, thank you.
I don't see clamoring hands raising to be recognized by the chair.
I have some modifications to the proposed decision. Change number 10 to say that the State Watershed Management Division has reviewed this application, found that it meets the NFIP requirements and the standards of the Hinesburg zoning regulations, And in number 2 of the conclusions to say, well, I guess 2 is fine the way it is. You're just suggesting special erosion control measures, so I guess I need,
Well, it needs to say is approximately 10 cubic yards of total filler proposed for the project?
that's back in,
In finding 2.
Oh, sorry.
that's in finding 2. So I guess,
The conclusion
I guess the conclusion is fine, and the order says in addition to the stabilization measures mentioned above, the areas exposed. So, yeah, I think that's fine in the order. So I think we're good.
So you making a motion?
Sure, I move to approve.
So are we going to try to ask for some sort of material that would keep in place if the grass isn't able to grow before then?
I think the proposal is that the fill shall be seeded and heavily mulched to achieve erosion control as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Order 2, I think, deals with the consequences of failure.
Okay.
So,
And I can add that, what Ted just said to the findings, either finding 2 or 3, something like that, just to mention what Eric said, seeded and heavily mulched.
Okay.
So move to approve as amended, or second, or third?
Did you finish your motion?
Yep. No, I move to approve as amended.
I second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Do I abstain?
Sure.
Is that?
Right.
Well, you're
Okay,
recused.
all right, well,
You
I
recused, so
wanna follow the.
we were just not
procedure.
even seeing you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Could
Good luck.
keep you busy for a month or so.
A few months.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Good job.
Appreciate all the
Thanks, guys.
hard work. Here, Cal.
What's your?
So we have a application to continue the
Digging the Star Wars back, man.
NRG?
Yes.
Request for a 6-month extension.
There was a letter in your packet explaining that, and
Move to approve the request?
you okay with that? This is the second sketch plan extension. There are some
Start on it.
extenuating circumstances which seem to warrant it.
Yep. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
My work here is done.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Any news and announcements?
How goes the search?
So I was telling John and Dennis at the outset that we did some initial interviews last week, and we're moving along. I will say that we've had a couple applicants drop out, which is unfortunate, but we're moving along. But that's about all I can say at this point because it's still in process. Other news and announcements. Select Board will be holding a public hearing on September 12th about the Planning Commission's proposal to revise the zoning to introduce some new commercial industrial screening measures, which will affect your review of those kinds of projects, but the real intent is to try to provide guidance to the Public Service Board so that they will look at those screening requirements when they review solar projects. And there was specific legislation that gave towns the ability to do that. So anyways, that was pretty well vetted, but the Select Board is holding a public hearing on the 12th if anybody's interested. And I think that's it.
Oh, aren't we supposed to go to the September 12th meeting? Or
You don't
we've been
have to,
asked
but there is that's a good point. There is also an open meetings law training
Yeah.
at that meeting, and I think all boards are invited to attend. To sort of understand what the open meeting law requires. There have been some legislative changes to it in the last year, so that's also happening on the 12th. You're a pretty stable board with members who've been on a long time and understand what's required, and you're well-staffed, so probably your attendance is not as critical as some of the other boards that don't have staff to help them out.
Mhm.
There was one other thing. I'm not sure that everybody knows because the water department hasn't made a big deal of it, but we've been under a prohibition for new water connections for over a year, maybe two. And that's been lifted. So we now have allocation to give, and not very much, but we have a little bit of allocation to give, and we're allowed to give it again.
Do you know how much?
Very little, about 1,600 gallons per day. Actually, I shouldn't say that. 5,000 for municipal institutional education or special projects. 5,000 for projects within the village core, so like the cheese plant or actually David Lyman's properties in the village core as well. So some of Brett Grabowski's project could tap into that 5,000, and then 1,600 for everybody else. Remembering that a single family home is about 210 gallons per day of usage.
So we're online.
They are online. The new wells are online and flowing.
And the old wells have been taken down?
I believe so. I believe that they're off, but I'm not 100% sure of that. That was the original plan, that those wells would come offline.
I heard they have to be available for 5 years.
Oh yeah, the plan is to keep
Okay.
keep them available, so if there were ever an emergency, they could be turned back on in a jiffy. Yep. Plus, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but maybe someday there'll be an MTBE contamination filter that's cheap and easy, in which case that would really help our water issues if we could turn those two wells back on.
Now, with the well not working, does the contaminants build up in it?
I don't know. That's an interesting hydrogeological question. I don't know.
Anything
Okay.
else?
Hopefully we're sending them all down to Huntington.
What's on our next,
Oh, yeah, good point. You have no applications on your next meeting agenda, so my hope was to not have that meeting.
okay,
You have no applications on your October 4th meeting agenda either, and one on October 18th that maybe we might push up to the first meeting in October. So it's very slow at the moment because the three big projects are in limbo. Still waiting to see if we strike water somewhere.
Now, what about the special meeting we're thinking about having? Greg,
Oh, right. I've gathered MAPPA and on the record review information, so I will get that out to you. And
we'll schedule that at some meeting.
I wasn't proposing a special meeting for that.
well, you know,
but just,
I think if the application volume continues to be light while we wait for these big projects to get their water act together, we might be able to dovetail that with one of your October meetings. You know, if we have one application, we could take half an hour to do that and maybe half an hour to talk about on the record review.
all right.
But I'll get that information out to you in the next few weeks.
I'm out of town the first October meeting, so it's fine if you cancel it.
Okay. And John, did you say
Yeah,
you,
I'll be out 2 weeks from today.
the September 20th meeting?
The one that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Given that everything wrapped up nicely tonight, we're past the warning date for the September 20th meeting,
Oh, right.
so if it's anything
Not
that needs to
gonna
be
happen.
warned, we can't do it then anyway, so I think we're definitely gonna cancel that meeting. Just a question of whether we meet on October 4th or just push everything off to like October 18th.
Okay,
That's all I have.
Adjourn.
second.
I don't think we have to vote on
Evidently
that.
don't have to vote on
I
that.
don't think
You have the power.
That's right, you can just.